everyone, and welcome to episode number 12 of Not Another Demo. As you know, Not Another Demo is the Cloud Security Alliance West Michigan's attempt at having real conversations with vendors, getting away from some of the marketing and the jargon and the acronyms and all of that good stuff, and really trying to understand what an organization, what a security company can do for your organization. So, with me, as always, Anthony and Lloyd from the Really Bad Security team. And we're pleased this week to have Brendan O'Connor and Michael Cruger from AppOmni with us. We're going to be talking a lot today about securing your SaaS applications. And so with that, Brendan, I'm going to turn this over to you. The first question that we always like to ask in these events is, again, at a time where people's calendars are booked full and vendors are, pestering people more and more and more and more for time on their calendar. Why would someone want to put an hour on their calendar to talk with AppOmni? And then maybe give us a little bit of a rundown as well of what you guys are doing.
Great, thanks. So why should you talk to us for an hour? The value prop is pretty simple. Cloud applications are some of the most important applications in the enterprise. SaaS applications have some of your most sensitive data, and by and large, the security team is not looking at them. In my background, I had the great experience of working at some cloud providers. I was the VP of Product and Infrastructure Security at Salesforce, and then the Chief Security Officer there. I spent 10 years there. Then joined ServiceNow, another great cloud company, and I went through this firsthand. I had deep technical expertise in one SaaS application, knew it inside and out, wrote some of that code, moved over to another SaaS application, and I thought that it would work the same. And I'll tell you, I felt like I was in a foreign country and I didn't speak the language. The way Salesforce implements security is entirely different from the ground up to the way ServiceNow does. And so I felt this personally. And so I started to look at major SaaS applications, Office 365, G Suite, Workday, Slack, Box. They all have different security models and they all have different control panels. There's so many levers, knobs, and switches on how these things work, and they're changing all the time as the cloud provider comes out with new updates. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's actually great value that you get, and that's part of software as a service. The challenge is, and I know this firsthand, the way most security teams approach SaaS is they treat it like an external vendor. They have a third-party risk process. They're going to scan the firewall. They're going to make sure you're patched and that your OSs are hardened. They're going to ask the cloud provider questions like, how do you store our data? Is it encrypted? Do you background check your employees? These are all good questions to ask, but it's all asking the cloud provider, are you doing your job on the shared responsibility model? And when you think about the big companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, of course they are. They're probably doing security a lot better than you are. But then what happens? Great, we're going to buy the product. They're secure. This is a secure cloud. And you hand the keys to the line of business. So now you have people that are experts in marketing or IT process management or sales or HR, not technical people, people that know their business, and they're in charge of the control panel. They're the ones that are changing security settings, opening up APIs, integrating third-party applications, building out the permissions and privilege model, and they're not security experts. Meanwhile, security usually doesn't even have a login. And if they did, they're not quite sure what they're looking at. Because each SaaS application is different, it's a really hard problem for security teams to solve. So what we do is we quickly scan. We scan public APIs. We walk the object hierarchy and show you who has access to what data. We analyze the configuration. How do you rank relative to best practices? How do you rank relative to your compliance requirements? Have you done silly things like disable encryption or turn off cross-site scripting protection? These are things that we see because security is not involved and they're not making these decisions. And you got someone in the line of business with good intentions that's just trying to make stuff work. They're not trying to cause harm to the company. They're just trying to make their customers happy and get stuff moving. And because no one's looking, you find a lot of data exposed and a lot of risky configurations out there. And these applications are on the public internet.
So what do you need in order to get started? So architecturally speaking, where do you guys sit and what do you need to get tied into these SaaS applications? You need a service account, how walk us through what that looks like.
It's a great question. So I have pretty strong feelings on this because I've been a security practitioner for more than 20 years. I don't like agents. If I can avoid it, I want no agents. I also don't like magic boxes. I don't want a magic proxy that I got to run all my traffic through and only then it can do something. So we deploy no agents, no network changes, no DNS, no proxies. We connect directly via API. And one of the cool things about our technology is we degrade gracefully based on the privileges you grant us. I'm a firm believer that security products should reduce your attack surface, not just shift it from one vendor to another. And so we have built the product with that in mind. If you want us to do auto remediation, you got to give us write access. If you want us to just scan, monitor, and alert, read only is fine. If you only want to look at compliance controls, we even have metadata only and config only modes. So we always give the customer control and make sure that we're meeting their needs and that we're not creating new attack surface.
Very cool.
Nice. So, run through maybe a quick list, to hit all of them, but maybe give us a quick list of the SaaS applications that you guys are currently working with.
Yeah, SaaS is a huge space, and there's thousands of SaaS applications, and they're not all created equal. So we really focus on what we think are the biggest platforms with the highest enterprise adoption and the most sensitive data. So like GitHub, it's on the internet, and that's got your source code, and it's the system of record for your source code. So we cover applications like GitHub and Slack. We cover Salesforce. We cover Microsoft 365 or Office 365, Box, Dropbox, Zoom, which we're all on right now, has become mission critical. So we're building new applications all the time, but today we support what we think are the most used and most important applications to the enterprise.
Nice. Now, when you're talking about the security of all of these different SaaS applications, I want to take us maybe a touch away from AppOmni and just have a security conversation in general a little bit. Do you find as you guys are working through the security of these different SaaS apps and each of them has such different security? Some of it I'm sure is because it's a different product, right? So there's going to be different features that you have to secure here and there. But are there standards? Is there a lack of standards from a security standpoint around SaaS applications that make these be so different from each other? Or do you guys find that there are some things that are somewhat consistent across the board, and then it's the more individual settings that are the ones that people miss the most?
There is not consistency in how cloud providers do this. And I think we're used to a little bit of consistency because we have a monoculture or duo culture in most other areas. Like if you have good Mac security people and good Windows security people and good Linux security people, you're pretty much covered. That's it. When you look at infrastructure as a service, if you learn GCP, if you learn Azure, if you learn AWS, that's kind of the platform as a service market. Now think about SaaS, highly heterogeneous. You got Salesforce and Microsoft, SAP and Oracle, Workday and ServiceNow, Box and Dropbox, Okta, GitHub, Slack, Zoom, like the list goes on. These are not going to consolidate down to one or two software companies. It's going to continue to be multiple vendors using best of breed products for different use cases in the enterprise. So they're not all going to collapse and decide to do things one way or the other. So I think the challenge is you will be in a highly heterogeneous mode for quite some time. And I would love to put some more pressure behind, is there a standardized way to look at, data primitives and basics around identity and access management and have some consistency? But I think that we're pretty far from that. And I think it's not a small engineering lift to go implement that on these huge systems that already have tens of millions of users.
So let's take one of the bigger ones, like a Salesforce, for example. How often do those configurations change? So I implement a Salesforce, I get things running. I feel like I have the security settings the way I want them. But there is perpetual updates to software, of course. So how often does that sort of stuff change on some of the bigger ones that you guys are working with?
They all have their own release calendar. I would say in general, most SaaS applications are changing between 12 and 4 times a year, either monthly or quarterly major releases where they're coming out with a whole bunch of new features. But we also see bursts of change because these applications, they're buying other companies and they're coming out with new products and they're stitching them all together because you want to have that seamless experience. So you can have a cloud vendor acquire a new company and kind of bolt it into the side and say, this is new functionality we offer. But you know what? It was built with a different security model and a different stack. Right. So you don't even have consistency within one particular vendor. And then you've got kind of on the extreme end, Google. I love Google, but they just start releasing stuff. It just kind of hits your inbox, or surprise, there's a new widget to look at. And you don't get the notice that you would get from like a Microsoft or a Salesforce.
So you mentioned the shared responsibility model. I want to kind of go back to that for a minute. And so please correct me if I'm wrong here, but um, it seems like your product helps with both sides of the shared responsibility model. So it's the subscriber's responsibility to make sure that those configurations are, set to best practices. If I'm subscribing to AWS, nothing's stopping me from opening up a public S3 bucket. But on the other side of that, the things I can't control, there's a responsibility for the SaaS provider to control those as well. So if you guys are, walking those public APIs and doing all that auditing, it really sounds like you guys are hitting both streams.
We try to. I say that we err more towards the side of the customer, because the big cloud providers, for the most part, are doing a really good job of their portion of the shared responsibility model. And having led security teams at both Salesforce and ServiceNow, speaking for both, I don't work at those companies, I'm speaking only for myself, but they have great security teams, and they're really doing things right, and generally better than customers could do it on their own. So it's not a problem with the cloud providers. I think it's a net benefit for security. The challenge in the shared responsibility model is, when we think about SaaS, a lot of common tasks aren't there. You don't have to harden the firewall. The network is abstracted from you. You don't have to patch. You don't have to worry whether you're running on a Java stack on top of Linux, or you're running in, C# on top of Windows. You don't care. The cloud provider is patching that, and that's all abstracted away from you. So you have fewer security domains to worry about. And that's great. That's uplift for your organization. The challenge is, of the security domains you need to think through, data access, configuration, governance and compliance, it comes in way more flavors, and they all do it differently. So there's fewer things for you to think about, but they're all wildly different. We want to automate that. And I think that the challenge is, what you want to do, you may not know how to properly express it in the language of that SaaS platform. And
so what you're really, the problem you're really solving then is, I don't want to have to train or hire my guys to be experts in all of our SaaS apps just so they can make sure that the security of it is correct, because you really need to understand exactly what every knob and switch and trigger does to really know how that's going to affect that SaaS application as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's a problem that's screaming for automation. This is not a thing that you just throw people at. It's too dynamic. It changes too quickly. And keep in mind that users are living inside SaaS applications. They are in these things all day, every day. That's how remote work is getting done. You would never say your endpoint protection strategy is, we're going to scan them twice a year as part of our annual audit. No, because that's not where the risk is. The risk is on a daily basis when the user is using apps and interacting with data. SaaS is not different. It's not a once a year problem or a twice a year problem. If someone opens a file or folder and shares it to the public internet with anyone but link, you don't want to wait 6 months to find out that someone just did that. If someone overprivileges an API and it's hanging out there like an S3 bucket, you don't want to find out when you've been breached, or 6 months later. You want to know. And going back to that S3 analogy, people aren't leaving this stuff open intentionally. This is usually not an insider threat. 99% of cases, it's good people with good intentions, just trying to get stuff done, and they didn't have guardrails. The challenge is, the cloud makes it easy to shoot yourself in the foot, and you can do it with a cannon. So the impact and the damage that you could cause in a pretty small amount of time can be significant.
So I think too, if I'm an executive or a leader of a company and I have a security team that's probably a pretty limited security team, as most companies do I want those people that I have on my staff that I'm paying, a good salary to, constantly chasing their tail, trying to figure out what the new security settings is all the time? So am I catching that right, Brennan?
Yeah, I would say,
so I don't have to necessarily stay up on, there's a new Salesforce release and now I have to have my guys go read the 300-page document or whatever that may be. That is something that you guys would assist with. And I guess, sorry, I'll make this question even longer. Is the interaction with AppOmni purely one of it's just a technology? Is there also like, are we interacting with people at AppOmni if I'm one of your customers? Like, let's say there's a new huge release of Salesforce that comes out and there's a bunch of new security settings. Is that just stuff you guys are doing behind the scenes? Are we having meetings? Are we talking through that for my organization? How does that part work?
As much as possible, we want the product to be able to provide the value. We're building a product, not a consulting practice. But having said that, we have worked in-house at these SaaS companies. My engineering team is full of people that worked at Apple and Slack and Salesforce and ServiceNow. They've been in-house security and understand these platforms. So our expertise gives us not only a unique view on the problem, but a big leg up in keeping our product up to date. So you have access to our team, and we want customers to understand. We want customers to understand this is the problem, this is why it's a risk, and this is how you fix it. And I really view the solution closer to like an AppSec SDLC type workflow. When you're going to put a new image in AWS, you're probably going to vuln scan it. You're going to hit it with Nessus, and you're going to make sure that it's up to date and it's a hardened image, and then you're going to roll it out. You don't just roll out an OS, then scan it in prod and say, oh, wow, we didn't apply patches this month, or we're 6 months out of date. You want to catch that in the process. When you think about writing code, you don't tell your developers, try really hard not to write bugs. That's our security strategy. Just try really hard, be perfect at your job, and if there's a bug, we'll scan it in prod. No, you give them tools so they can self-serve, so they can understand that if there's bugs in their code, SQLi, XSS, that there's tools that are helping them. You still may have checks in production. You want to scan that code or do pen tests, but as much as possible, shift it left, prevent the problems from occurring in the first place. SaaS is no different. So it's config as code. You should be looking at these changes before they go into production, not just watching production and saying, well, if we get breached, we're going to hope that we detect it. So you got to empower your IT team to self-serve, to be able to understand that the changes they're making are differing from baseline, or they're introducing, highly privileged accounts, exposing APIs, turning off critical security controls, because they're probably not doing it on purpose. They're probably just trying to get something to work quickly.
So I'm at an organization, let's say that as a for example, and I'm an engineer or an analyst on an application team responsible for configuring applications. But our security program doesn't necessarily view application configuration as part of their responsibility. They're like, for years, application configuration hasn't been our problem. I don't want to deal with this. How would I, as that person, try to convince a security program like, hey, AppOmni is something we really need to get in here, and you need to kind of view it as like, shared responsibilities internally. We have a shared responsibility between application configuration and information security to make this work. So how do I break that barrier and the kind of the mindset of that application configuration isn't necessarily a security responsibility?
So I'll take our company and the tech out of it and just look at it and say, as a security professional, are you going to make the case that mission critical data in systems of record, in the applications that are most used by your enterprise, are not in your purview or not something you worry about? Like, everyone should be worried about it. I think the challenge is they didn't understand how deep the rabbit hole goes, because SaaS came out as like, it's a web app, right? I'm going to scan it. I'm going to look for XSS. I'm going to look for SQLi. The vendors do a great job of preventing those bugs in their code before they hit production. I can trust Microsoft. I can trust Salesforce and ServiceNow to have great security in their code. But buying a safe car doesn't give you a driver's license, and it doesn't mean that you're driving it correctly. It doesn't mean that you're driving in the right lane. It doesn't mean you even have your seatbelt on. So at a certain point, they can do their job perfectly, but there's still a piece on what are you trying to do. And one action is not necessarily benign or malicious. Like connecting an API, that's not inherently a bad thing. It could probably be a great thing. Now, if you overprivilege it, or you expose it to the public internet, or it doesn't have auth, those are ways in which it can fail. But you're not trying to do an inherently evil activity. You're trying to create value. So really the challenge is one of, does your implementation match your intention? That's kind of the basic. Are you doing what you intend? Did you intend to expose that? And the answer is usually no. But because people don't have a quick way to understand that, they end up making mistakes. And because security says, this isn't my job, it's the cloud provider's job. It's not. I mean, data governance has always been your job.
Yeah. So how quickly are you alerting to when something like this happens?
Okay, now I'll give you the AppOmni answer. One of the cool things that we do is we offer a free risk assessment. We say, give us an hour and we'll just show you what the outside world can see. It usually takes us less than an hour. It connects in about 5 minutes. Usually 30 minutes in, we're going through live scan results. So I'm from Missouri. I live in California, but I'm from Missouri. That's the show me state. Talk is cheap. Show me. I've been a buyer. I've been a CISO. I've had way too many security vendors with ridiculous promises, and it doesn't deliver. So we're trying to be anti that security company. We're security practitioners that built a product, and it does what we say it does. And we have no problem showing our customers or showing people that want to see it. Yeah, it really does work that fast. And yes, you probably have far more problems in your SaaS applications than you think you do because you've never looked.
Never looked, yeah. So that question kind of leads me into things that I always like talking about in these, and that is the interaction between customer and company. So you talked a little bit about your proof of value, proof of concept, but let's talk a little bit more about what it's like interacting with AppOmni. Pre-sales, a little bit of what that process looks like, and what maybe going through that proof of value looks like as well. But also post sales. I'm a firm believer that companies make or break their long-term vision based off of how well customers are using the product, not 3 months after they buy it, but 2 years after they buy it, 3 years after they buy it, when it's time for all of those renewals and other things to come up. So can you talk a little bit about, I'm a company that wants to start working with AppOmni, what that's going to look like both pre and post sales?
I mean, pre-sales and post-sales is hopefully the same experience. I felt like I got a bait and switch from vendors that, loved me and promised me everything until I signed that PO. And once they got the money, we'll see you at renewal. So that's not us. We can't, as a startup, you can't afford to have unsuccessful customers. You can't afford to give people a bad experience. We all know that security is a small community. And when you find vendors and tools that you like, you talk about it. And when people let you down or they lie to you or they fail to deliver, you talk about it. I know that. I've been in this community for a long time. So we can't afford to have unsuccessful customers. So we bend over backwards to make our customers successful. But one of the cool things that we do is we're also doing threat research and monitoring what's going on out there. So as new exploit code is published, as new attack techniques are published on the internet, we are proactively notifying our customers, hey, we've got you covered. This check is already in our platform. Here's where you go to look at it. Here's how you can do controls assurance. And because we're always on and we're always scanning, our product can actually go back in time. So we can say, well, this vuln was released on October 8th. Were we okay on October 8th or did something happen? Well, we can actually rehydrate those models from previous days and say, here's who had access to that data. Here's what your config looked like on that date. We've got you covered. And so to me, that's one of the coolest things that we do is we're telling our customers, this is why you bought the product. And here's the value it's providing you in the background without you having to do anything. You just get it because we already had these checks. We already had this monitoring, and we could go back in time and give you assurance that you didn't have a problem between now and then.
So how do, I'm on board, I bought this is great. But as an organization, what are some of the barriers or pitfalls that you see as people go to implement your solution or consume your solution and use it? What are some of the things as an organization you could be prepared for? Or what changes should we be prepared to make as we implement AppOmni?
Because people haven't looked at SaaS applications, when security comes knocking on IT's door and saying, hey, we want to go over our O365 config with a fine-tooth comb, or we want to go through the Zoom control panel, or analyze our Slack instances and understand who's connected and what their privileges are. Most of the time, someone's looking over their shoulder saying, what did I do wrong? Why is the security police here? When I was at Salesforce doing product security, which is where I got my start in cloud, I used to give a talk called The Accountant and the Auditor. And when you think about it, if you have an auditor from the IRS or you have your accountant that helps you with your taxes, they're really kind of doing the same job, right? They have the same data set, your W-2, the US tax code, but their motivations are different. You feel like the auditor from the IRS doesn't care if it's painful. They don't care if this is an uncomfortable experience. They're trying to get you to pay the most tax possible. Your accountant, they're trying to make it easy. They're trying to take stuff off your plate. They're trying to make sure that you pay the least tax possible. Neither one tells you not to pay your taxes. So security can be the police. We can be the auditor from the IRS. We can be the bad guy that shows up and you're going to have a bad time and we've got the power here. You're going to do what we say. I don't like that. I would much rather say, listen, you got to pay your taxes. I'm going to help you make sure that that is painless, quick, easy, and that you pay the least amount of security tax possible. So you've got to approach your partners in IT in the business, understanding that they may not like security knocking on their door, and they may feel like you're trying to throw them under the bus. So you got to work around that. And I look at it very much like an AppSec workflow. Let us help you before you make changes in production. Let us scan pre-release. Let us have a process where you get a bug list of here's the 5 config things that you've done wrong, and you need to go fix them before your security is going to okay that release to production. And then it feels like you have a partner. You have a clear finish line. You have a tool that's helping you understand because you're not trying to create risk for the organization. So finding issues doesn't magically get them fixed. Having a big spreadsheet full of vulns doesn't close it. It doesn't get us security progress. I like to say, never confuse motion with progress. You can work up a sweat running in a circle. You didn't get anywhere though. So finding issues, but how do we fix them and how do we operationalize so that we don't have this problem in the future? And this isn't a fire drill every month with us finding that there's config drift or inappropriate access in production.
I like it. It's almost as if Brendan's been paying attention to our soapbox that we stand on all the time.
Almost like I'm a security
it's almost
guy.
like he's done this before, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's something that sets us apart. I've actually done this job at scale. I have carried a pager back when you actually carried pagers before PagerDuty. I mean, I've responded to incidents. I have been up for 48 hours straight in that war room trying to figure out what happened on incidents. I have, I've found bugs. I've been able to present my security findings to the community. I've done this. I understand the challenge. I hated vendors that tried to tell me how to do my job. We're more like, we had your job. Here's how we did it. Does this approach work for you?
Yeah, I always say that back when I was on the other side of the fence and had a real job, that the phone numbers back when you used phone numbers that I had memorized were the vendors I didn't want to talk to. Right, like I saw that one pop up on my screen, and I'm like, that's going straight to voicemail. Just because of, and it wasn't even a technology, again, and this is why I asked some of that like pre and post sales stuff. So it wasn't a technology issue. It was just like, how are they going to interact with me? And, things like, you're not going to see me again until it's time for renewals is a bad way to go. So, I think some of what we're trying to do with this is, there's a couple of different conversations that need to change. The vendor to customer conversation in both directions, honestly. And then that internal security to business or security to IT, those conversations have to be different as well. So we're on the same page here. How cool is that?
I'll tell you a quick story, and I'm not going to name anyone, but I'll say that I've been on an incident bridge where we had to get support from our vendors. And so it's late at night, and we've got the internal team, we got a couple of vendors on the phone, and we're describing our problem and what we need help with. And one of the vendors said, we're not going to move forward without a PO for professional services engagement.
Yep.
That is the wrong thing to say to a CISO when they're fighting an incident, is I'm not even going to talk to you until we get a PO for a services engagement. I did not renew with that vendor, and I won't do business with them again. That's an extreme example, but like, that's not partnership. That's not what I'm looking for in a security company. I need to know, hey, we'll figure out the finance stuff later. Right now, my customer needs help. Let's help them.
Yeah. I mean, in my other role, when I see a vendor being displaced from a company, it is almost always a support or a service or a sales related issue and not a technology related issue. I've seen people actually go from, maybe a more robust product to a less robust product simply because of the support issues. So it's a very interesting thing for all vendors out there to pay attention to what we're talking about right here, right now. So. Good stuff. So looking at the clock here, we're kind of running up against our half an hour. So Anthony, Lloyd, you guys have any further questions for Brennan?
I don't think so. This has been it's been a great conversation. Thanks.
Really thank you.
Yeah, it has. So I guess a couple of things to the viewers out there, and Brendan, certainly correct me if I'm wrong. If you have a bunch of SaaS applications and you're not 100% sure if they're secure or not, AppOmni seems to be a company you should be spending some time with. I think even your proof of value could certainly show some issues that may be out there. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We always we earn our reputation. We want to earn every customer that we have and do it by solving really hard problems, and that our tech does what we say it does, and it works as quickly as we say it does. And we don't mind people putting us to the test. If we can't stand behind our promises, you shouldn't talk to us.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, well, fascinating conversation. Mike, thanks for putting this together. Brennan, it was really a pleasure. This is exactly how I like these to go. I think this is the type of conversation that needs to happen more often in our industry. With that, everyone that's watching, please do the like, subscribe, share, click the bell, do all the fun YouTube stuff. And we will see you again real soon. Thanks, everyone.